Welcome back to Switched to Linux. Well, today what we're going to do is just a little tutorial on setting up and installing Tails. And we're going to look at Tails because, it's just becoming more and more crazy in our world with as much tracking as we're getting. And we're going to talk a little bit more about tracking and this kind of stuff down the road. So what you want to start thinking about doing is probably a little bit more Tor and other things like that. Now, it's not an absolute silver bullet, but it's going to help you against the advertisers. It's going to help you against all this. That's why I set up my Android phone to run everything through Tor and get rid of all the Google services. And I just have a general policy. I don't sign into stuff over there. I really don't use my smartphones the way most Americans use smartphones, where it's just my data dump for my life, because that's dangerous. So I don't use Tails exclusively everywhere. I don't use Tor exclusively everywhere. Frankly, it's a little slow. But if I'm starting to do little research things, you start to look into, maybe you have some weird wart and you want to do some research on it. Maybe you want to look up some products without them being linked back to you, whatever else. Yeah, and I've done that on a lot of the Christian topics I research. Sometimes it'd be weird topics, and I just don't want them to be pushing that type of stuff down through my feed. And so I'll usually use usually when I'm doing Tor stuff, I actually have a Qubes install on this computer, which is probably one of the better ways to go. But Tails is a great thing because it's really designed well to be used on a thumb drive. And so what we are going to do today is we are going to install Tails on a USB key that has a nice little keychain thing, so I can attach it to my car keys and always have this nice little Tails key running around, which I could literally use to transfer files onto it and things. Now, that's the consideration, is that there's two different ways that you can use Tails. Now, first, it's not really designed to be used in a VirtualBox, which is funny because we're going to be using Tails in a VirtualBox a little bit today, just to install it. And we're going to talk about why when we get to the installation. But with Tails, it's really designed to run off of a live key, and that means you can do two things. The easiest and fastest way is to download the ISO, burn it onto this. It'll boot up just fine. It won't save anything at all. And that's if you want the absolute deepest, most privacy-centric, that's the way to go. Whoop, I dropped my key. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to set this up to be used, still very privacy-centric, still very good, but we're going to set this up with some persistence so you can save some files and some documents. So if you're out at a friend's house or whatever else, there's some document or you need to use a computer or whatever else, you actually have your own Linux operating system with you on your keychain. You can plug it into any available computer. You can get on the internet through Tor. You can save the files that you have, whatever else you need to do, you have an option to do that. So that's essentially what we're going to do. Now, if you have mostly a Windows type machine or whatever else and you want to access Tor, I do not recommend the Tor bundle. There's just too much issue with DNS leakage, etc. The best way to use it from there is to use the Unix operating system that runs through a virtual machine. That one's specifically designed to run through a virtual machine. That's the best way to go in that instance. And of course, if you're just a hardcore Linux guy and you want some geeky Tor-like security, one of the better ways to do that is just to use Qubes. So there's a lot of different ways to use Tor, and I have videos about each of those things. But today we're going to be focusing on Tails more than anything. And like I said, we're going to be using VirtualBox, and the reason we're using VirtualBox for the installation is because it'll allow us to download the ISO, boot it up very clean as an ISO into a VirtualBox, and then we're actually going to be using that to install it. And so to explain kind of why, we're going to walk through their website and how to get Tails here. So you go to their Tails, which is tails.bomb, I think, I don't know, BOUM. .org, and you can download Tails. Now, of course, the The most recent Tails 3.3 just came out, so you can get that over here. And then if you come down here to install, you'll find a lot of the various options. Now, there is the download only option, and this is the one I usually use. You can also click on this, and then you start out by whatever your distro is. So the reason we make this distinction and the reason I do not choose to use these options is these all require you to install extra software on your system. So if I were to click on the Windows, then what I need to do is I need to download and install an installer. Well, I'm kind of one of those guys that I really don't want to install software on my system if there's a better way to do things, even on the Linux platform. So I don't really like to do that. So what we're going to do will work in Windows, Mac, or Linux without having to install the extra installers, and that is we're going to download the ISO, we're going to boot it into a VirtualBox, and then we're going to run the installer from there, because you can also run the installer from inside. And so we're going to go back again, and we're going to hit the download only option. Now, and we're hitting your download only option. If you're still on the older version of Firefox, go ahead and install this add-on. It'll download and verify it automatically. Or you can use the BitTorrent or the OpenPGP option, which will also verify the system as well. I am running right now on Firefox Quantum, and the add-on does not work. So I'm sure that they'll probably get this worked eventually. I just don't know. But if you just want to come down, this is what I did today, is I downloaded it with the BitTorrent is what I did. So once you get your ISO downloaded, you need to boot it into the VirtualBox. But if you're using VirtualBox, one of the things about VirtualBox right now is that the default VirtualBox setup will not actually work, because you have to be able to run plug a USB drive in, and the default of VirtualBox does not install the extensions pack. So if you come into, not that settings, you want to come up into your file preferences up here, and you go down to your extensions, you'll see that I have the Oracle Virtual Machine Extensions Pack. So what you need to do is figure out what your version of VirtualBox is. So I'm running 5.0.40, so that's the build of the VirtualBox I'm running. So I need to go online and I need to fetch the extension pack for that one specifically. Okay, so we're going to go back into our web browser and onto the VirtualBox page, and we're going to come down to Downloads. And then over here, let's see, I just got to find it. Here's the, where is it at? There you go. Here's the extensions pack, but note that this is 5.2.0. You have to grab the extensions pack for your specific version. So to find your specific version, come down to VirtualBox older builds, find the one that you're using, and then inside of here, you'll see that you have the option to download the variety of things, and then what you'll see is the extensions pack here. So I'm running this one here, 5.0.40 for Ubuntu, and so I just need to come down here, grab the extensions pack, and then once you have that downloaded, and then you're going to come back over here to your virtual machine, come up here to your file preferences. You're doing all this before we're loading anything, by the way. Come down to extensions, click on this little guy right here. This is going to give you a dial-up, or a dialog box, excuse me, a dial-up. And then go ahead, click on this, install the extensions pack. I have had, and some people have reported some issues with the extensions pack. If it's not installing for you, grab the instructions to do it through the terminal. That tends to work. The GUI, it worked perfectly fine today. I have had issues with this in the past. Now, once that's used, there's one more step you probably will need to do. And that is that the virtual machine, your users is not actually set to the virtual machine user box immediately. And so what you need to do is enter your password correctly. Okay, so you need to come in here and grab your user and make sure that your user is in the VBox users group. So on Linux Mint here, just click the groups, come down here and make sure that VBox users is included in the group. That does not happen by default. So if you're finding you still cannot insert a USB drive and pass it through into the virtual machine, that's why. Check that your user group, and you can also get, just add it to that user group on through the terminal, through any other means. Then the last thing you need to do is, once all that's done, I would reboot the computer. You need to reboot it just to make sure things are going. You might just be able to log out and log back in. I went ahead and rebooted just to make sure I didn't have any other issues. Grab the machine you're going to use. I still have my Shark Linux on here, so that's the one we're going to use. Come into settings and then come down here and enable the USB controller, and then just pump this up to the highest controller you have on your system. So then what's going to happen is whenever I plug in a USB drive to my port, it's going to pass that through. All right, so now we should be ready to go. We're going to click in on your virtual machine, the optical drive. We're going to insert the ISO for my Tails 3.3, and we're going to go ahead and boot up. And I'm going to full screen this, and then we get into our Tails screen, and then what we're going to do here now is just log right on into the system. So we'll give this a second to boot up, and I will cut the video back in when we are booted up. Okay, so we are on the 3.3 startup screen here, and what we're going to do is we just need to start Tails. I do not recall if we need administrative rights to do this. So just in case we do, we're going to go ahead and set an administrative password. I'm just going to do, let's just do Tails, just something easy to remember. Now you need to do that because I just don't remember if when we install this, if I have to enter an administrative password, and if you do not do that on this step, you will not be able to run the install. You can't install packages or anything else if you don't enter that, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Now we'll hit the Start Tails, and then that should take just a moment here to boot us into our GNOME shell for our Tails build. All right. Now you will notice that it does tell you that there is a non-free virtual machine detected. Warning, warning, warning. So you will get this error anytime you are loading into one of these virtual machines. And that is it's a feature built into Tails to just kind of let you know that, Tails is not necessarily built for the virtual machine because the host computer can see what's going on. And so you can see we're already active on the internet. Great, that's fine. We're not going to really do anything from here at this point in time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug my USB drive in. Now, if you are on the active window, so in this case here, it actually went right into my my host system. I'm actually just going to minimize that. I just want to see if I can boot this even though it's mounted to the host system. So if I'm going to come down here to Devices, and then we're going to search for this inside. So you can see that I have the webcams, I have the receivers, this is my my audio, and this guy here is the USB drive. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. I heard the sound, it dismounted from my host system, so it now should be mounted down here into my machine. So there it is right there. It is mounted into the machine. So from here, we're going to go up into your applications, down into Tails, and come on, Tails. Thank you. Tails installer. And then from this, it's going to boot up our Tails installer. So now you can clone the current Tails, or you can download a new, or use an ISO for an image. So with this, I'd actually have to have a ISO here available, which I might be able to grab transferring networking, but we're not going to bother. Like I said, we've just downloaded this. It's clean. We've checked it. It should be good to go. And so we're just going to clone the current Tails. Now, what I could do is I could install some software I would want first and then clone it if I wanted to do that. Actually, before we do that, though, let's just show you the software that's on Tails by default. We have the Tor browser, we have Thunderbird, KeePassX, Pigeon, Terminal, calculator, files, GTK hash, there's KeePass again, a text editor, we have GIMP, Inkscape, LibreDraw, Scribus. So, I mean, you can literally see they have decked this out with a lot of software. So here's a Bitcoin wallet, Gobi, the Onion circuits. Onion Share is a Tor-based file sharing program. We do have an unsafe browser down here. There's your full LibreOffice, Poedit. Audacity, Brassario, Pitivi, Sound Juicer, Sound Recorder, Videos, Traverso. System settings, there's our installer again. Alright, so now you'll see here actually if I go into configure persistent volume, it will not let us go into here because we are not installed. So that's what that error is about. So let's go down here. We're going to clone our current, our target. We just select our USB drive for our target. Go ahead and install. So it asks us, do you want to format this? And yes, we're going to do that. And now we are going to be installing. And so you're going to see it's going to go through the entire system here. It's going to partition the device. And I'm going to go ahead and let this do its thing. And I'm going to pop back on here when there's something else we need to chat about. And we'll take note of our time as well. Note that when you do boot into Tails, then it will resynchronize the clock, which it has to do to access the Tor circuits. So you can see our time right now is 23:53. It says it should take about half an hour to install is what it says. But we're going to go ahead and check that. The other concern I have is sometimes installing things on a USB 2 device takes a little bit longer. If this takes too long, I'm going to abort the process, restart it, and come back on when we do. Okay, so that actually only took 6 minutes, 7 minutes to do. So it says it's complete. So now what we need to do is we actually need to shut this machine down. And then what we need to do next actually is I'm going to boot it up onto another computer. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to jump on into another computer here and we'll boot this up and then we will have a look at that. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to plug my drive in here. I shut down actually all the background light just so that we can see this better. So on this particular computer, if I plug in a drive and then I need to hit the F12 key to bring up my boot menu, I'm going to come down here and this is the USB 1. So we're going to go ahead and boot into that. Okay, so this is the screen we saw earlier. And I apologize, I don't have a capture card. Some people are like, get a capture card. Well, someone send me a capture card. I'd be glad to use it. But as it is, don't have the funds for that. So basically the same screen that we had before. We want to come down here. We're going to go ahead and set an administrative password again. Simply because we might need to do something with configuring the drive. So go ahead and hit my add. And then hit the Start Tails button, and then that should boot us up into Tails. Okay, so we're going to come down here into the Applications menu, and you want to come down into your System Tools and hit your Configure Persistent Volume. So that's kind of where we're going to right now. See if I can get better focus if I do that on the screen. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to enter a passphrase. Okay, so here you want to pick a passphrase that is actually going to be something good that you're going to remember. And so in this case here, I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this as a production type Tails or not. So just for that case, I'm just going to go ahead and enter in a good password. Okay, so once you have your password in there, we're going to go ahead and hit create. And then this is going to set up a persistent volume on the rest of the drive. Okay, so once that setup is done, then what it's doing now is it's asking you what you would like to keep saved. Now, understand this, that when you are using Tails, anything that you are adding to persistence, this drive is not hidden. If somebody gains access to this, they could attempt to hack it. They could say, we're going to, torture you until you open it, whatever means they want to do. So adding a persistent volume into Tails is an inherent security risk. The other risk is if you configure something differently. One of the ways Tails works is it removes what you would call the fingerprint of the computer you are on. So if you're unaware of what a fingerprint is, when you are browsing the internet, the analytics and all of the other things will take a lot of things. They'll take the MAC address. They can take the IP address. They also, though, take the things you don't think of, like the browser configuration, including tiny, minute things you might have changed to the browser. They take the screen resolution. They'll take what drivers are installed, and they can basically produce a fingerprint of the computer. The way Tails is designed out of the box, if you just use it off of an ISO or if you do not configure a persistent volume, then it will normalize the fingerprint, which says that somebody can determine you're using Tails, but they have a very hard time determining who that actually is. But, big but, if you happen to configure this drive, now you are effectively manipulating and making minute changes to that fingerprint. So this could be a means to de-anonymize you. And that's why I say this is fine for companies, but don't be doing social activism or weird stuff like that with this. But what you can just do here is anything that you check will enable the persistent drive. So do you need to set up a key ring? Yes or no? Again, the keyring setup, great if you need to remember passwords, bad if you don't. SSH clients, Pigeon. You might use this for checking email, so you might do that. You have your GNOME keyring. Network configurations, if you're using this on a standard system that has a wireless card, or you're on a consistent network, or maybe you go to the same coffee shop and you don't want to have to re-enter the information every time, you can click on this and it will save that. Browser bookmarks, so you can actually save browsers. There's printer configurations, Bitcoin clients, apt packages. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to download, just store a copy of whatever apt packages and apt lists. So you do a sudo apt-get upgrade, or sudo apt-get update rather. It's going to save that package list rather than discarding it when you start. And then the dot files is one specifically. What this is going to do is it's going to produce a system link into the home directory for every file that you have. Makes things more convenient, but this definitely changes around configuration files. And so this will, a dot file using that will essentially de-anonymize you. But again, if you're just trying to prevent the businesses from tracking you, no big deal at all. If you happen to be a social activist or something, you'd probably be better not to use that. Okay, so now you can close that. So now what that's going to look like is when you go into your system, this is your Tails data. Okay, so after the persistent volume is configured, you need to shut the system down and reboot. Now on reboot, you will see that you have the option here to enter your encrypted persistent storage. We still have the option down here for administrative password. Once again, we're going to go ahead and set the administrative password. Now again, note I'm go ahead and install just using Tails as my administrative password. This resets every time. This does not save anywhere. So if you just want to do some simple stuff, I'm just installing it just in case I need it. This one here, again, we're going to go ahead and turn the camera. Okay, we're going to go ahead and hit the unlock button. So now we should be booting in, and since we've, let's see, restart Tails to lock it again. Okay, so it will be unlocked until we sign off of Tails. So you have the option of not enabling that. And so that is, depending on what you're doing, that's what you may or may not want to do. So what I did at the very last step, throwing things in the documents like that, those types of things will not be saved. You have to go into the persistent files to do that. So we're going to come back down here and do places, and I'm just going to go into computer. So this is, you'll recall where I dropped that file. It's not there anymore. And the reason is it will not save anything. Now, if you use that dot files, what that's going to do is it's going to map. So this will kind of work like a regular Linux distro would if you happen to do that. But for the most part, it's a lot safer if you just go ahead and come down here into your persistence, and you can run things down here. So if I create a new folder here and create a new file, which again I'm just going to go down and do a text file, save it, and make sure you're saving it inside your persistent. Did I put that in persistent, or did I put that in Tor browser? I'm sorry, I put that in Tor browser. I was supposed to put that in persistent. My apologies. I'll just go ahead and save the file there. That's fine. So now it's saved inside Tor browser, inside persistent. I want to move it to their persistent. Okay, so now what you can do is you can have your various documents. They'll be saved within the persistent. This one's new. That's a new functionality since I've used persistence last. So Tor browser is anything anything that you download from Tor is going to land in the Tor folder there. The persistent is anything that you want to be saved. I'm guessing this one probably also saves. I'm actually going to drop this down there and see if that saves it down there or not. Of course, I actually have to drop it. Okay, so now we've actually put this. Let's just do. We're going to change this to docs, and then we'll drop my little file into there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to shut the system down again. We're going to reboot it, and then when we do that, then we'll go ahead and have a look at what is remaining. Okay, so now we are starting up Tails again. And then now when the persistent folder is set up, we should be able to go into the persistent folder and see the files that we had remaining. So we'll come down here to persistent. Now you'll see that my document folder is still here. That's all good. What we had in Tor browser is gone, and what stays in Tor browser consistent is there. So that is how we can do that. Down here under Tails, you can reconfigure your persistent volume over here by going and grabbing that out of the Applications menu. So this way you can add things or remove things from the persistent drive as you see fit. Then there's a Save button down here at the bottom. Don't forget the Save button. So that is how you can make adjustments to that. And so that is how you set up install Tails. So that setup will work for any system, Windows, Mac, or Linux. You can install it through a virtual machine using those simple steps. Of course, there's other methods there. You can install the installation application if you want to do that. Or the safest, most anonymizing way is to just use it as a live install. Now, another disadvantage of the live key is that it will not update itself, but this version here that it's installed, it will update itself. And so you have that functionality to keep in mind. So hopefully that has been helpful for you to figure out how to download, install Tails. And hopefully that has answered some of the questions about using a persistent volume and other related items to that. So thank you for watching. And if you'd like to help support what we are doing, you can check out switchtolinux.com/support. And then you can learn about the various ways that you can help us. You can check the links below for Patreon and Amazon accounts. If you happen to use any of those, you can go check me out over there. So thank you for watching and hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.